Shame and How to Overcome It, produced by Ulrich Alman. To understand shame, let's first read this excerpt from To Die of Saying, Shame by Boris Cyrulnik. If you want to know why I have nothing to say, you only need to understand what silenced me. The circumstances of the event and the reactions of those around me are its co-authors. So, I will remain silent to protect myself. I will only show on the surface the part of my story you are able to bear. The other part, the dark one, will continue to live in the underground of my personality. This mute story will nonetheless govern my relationships, because the unspoken, I have told them to myself deep inside. Once we've read this text by Boris, a great psychiatrist who studied the subject in depth, we understand clearly that shame is a feeling that makes you want to hide, a feeling that makes you want to disappear, a feeling that makes you want to no longer be among others. The narrator says that he carries within him a painful story, but he chose to remain silent. His silence is not accidental. It is the result of the traumatic event and also the reactions of others, the entourage who did not understand, did not support, or even worsened his suffering. He states he will only show a part of himself, the part others can bear, but he keeps another dark, unspeakable part, buried in the underground of his personality. This unspoken story governs his relationships because his secret story influences how he relates to others. Finally, he describes his silence as a defense strategy. Words are too painful, sometimes impossible to say or unbearable to hear, he says. Words are pieces of affection, but they sometimes carry too much information. Thus, my silence became a defense strategy against the unspeakable, the impossible to say, the painful to hear. If shame is so painful and hurts the wounded person so deeply, then how can we get out of it? How can we get out of this black hole? How can we escape this inner torment that poisons life? Because if we do nothing, this poisonous feeling that Boris Cyrulnik describes can ruin us and hinder our whole existence and our relationships with others. We hide so as not to suffer, we hide so as not to feel shame. That is the very paradox of freeing oneself from this painful feeling, or rather, this emotion. So, how do we break the silence to escape shame? Example of Primo Levi. To overcome shame, let us first understand what not to do if we want to avoid remaining trapped in it. Let's continue with Cyrulnik's book, which mentions the story of Primo Levi, a Jewish survivor of Auschwitz. In his book, If This Is a Man, Primo Levi could not reshape the story of the horror that happened to him. He could not free himself from the shame of being reduced to a number, an object. We were no longer called by our names, but by a number, he said. Nobody wanted to hear him, so he kept replaying the horror of shame and dehumanization he lived in the concentration camps. So, how can one reshape their story to be freed from shame? Let's listen to what reshaping means, according to Boris Cyrulnik. Reshaping one's story was the solution to overcome shame and to re-enter a process of resilience, as Cyrulnik says, reshaping the wounded person's narrative. Boris Cyrulnik explains that when someone experiences trauma, they cannot always speak about it immediately. The shock is too violent. The words don't yet exist to describe the horror. The entourage may deny, minimize, or reject. The person stays silent. Over time, the memory of the trauma remains alive but confused, raw. Reshaping consists of transforming the inner experience into a narrative, giving form and coherence to chaos, finding words to express what was unspeakable, adapting the story to the audience, not saying everything to everyone, but choosing what others can bear, revisiting the story multiple times. Each time you talk about it, you reshape it a little differently, as if reconstructing your identity from the wound. Therefore, reshaping is the psychic and narrative work that transforms a mute wound into a livable story, preventing it from remaining a dead weight inside. Primo Levi's mistake, according to Cyrulnik. Primo Levi, the Auschwitz survivor and writer, testified extensively about his experience in his books, notably, If This Is a Man. But Cyrulnik says he made a tragic mistake. Primo Levi believed that simply telling the raw truth of the trauma would be enough to free himself. He thought that a raw testimony, without transformation, without reshaping, could relieve shame and carry memory. However, Cyrulnik highlights that recounting trauma without reshaping it, without giving it new meaning, risks plunging back into suffering rather than soothing it. Levi spent his life testifying, but remained a prisoner of his trauma, until he ended up committing suicide in 1987. For Cyrulnik, Levi's mistake was not finding a way to reshape his story in a form that also allowed him to live afterward. He spoke, but did not manage to reshape. Reshaping equals transforming the unspeakable into a bearable story, reorganizing memory so that the wound becomes not only pain, but also a reconstructed identity. Primo Levi's mistake equals believing that telling the naked truth was enough. Without reinterpretation and meaning, words alone can crush rather than liberate. End. And to conclude, thank you ladies and gentlemen for watching this video. Like and comment if you've ever gone through moments of shame, and tell us in the comments if this topic interests you, and if you'd like us to cover more about shame, psychology, or psychoanalysis. Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone in your circle who may need it to free themselves from shame. Bye, Ulrich Alman.